Welcome to Taste the Messiah. Today's taste is titled Joshua Prefigures Yeshua. And in actuality, both of those names are Hebrew. In other words, Joshua is the name Yeshua, and of course, Jesus is Yeshua. So they're both exactly the same name. Something which is very obvious and yet not often observed is how the book, and therefore the story of Joshua, begins at Passover. One thing, they have the same name, which I just said, which is also obvious in Hebrew. The English translation of their names causes them to be somewhat distanced, and yet the book of Joshua couples them together. Let's examine Joshua's week leading to Passover or Passover. In Joshua chapter 1 speaks about the death of Moses. Then we go to verse 11, occurs on the 7th of Nisan, the 7th day of Nisan. And prepare provisions, for in 3 days you will cross over to possess the land. So that's what Joshua told his the Hebrews, is that on the 7th of Nisan, they were to prepare provisions because in 3 days they would cross over, making that, of course, the 10th of Nisan. So likewise, Yeshua told his disciples, as recorded in Luke 22:7, then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover or Pesach must be killed. And he sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat. In Joshua 2:1, it says, 2 spies are sent out to Jericho. There Rahab was told to bind a scarlet thread. The scarlet thread is a picture of the blood which is given at Pesach, ultimately showing us that the giving of Yeshua's blood on Calvary, which purchased the price for our sin. Joshua 4:19, they crossed over the Jordan, which is the Jordan River, and it was the 10th day of Nisan. Interestingly, the 10th day of Nisan is the very day that the lambs are gathered and examined to see if they are suitable sacrifices for the Passover. Then after they crossed over the river, the 12 stones are set up in Gilgal from the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua 5:2 says, the second circumcision occurred, which prefigures the Brit Hadashah. In other words, they were being circumcised again, but in actuality, this group of Israelis or Hebrews had not been circumcised because they were born in the desert and had never been circumcised. But it shows that there was another Brit or another cut, in other words, another covenant cutting, and or coming, you could even say. So the Brit Hadashah, which is the New Covenant or New Testament, as we call it in English, which is spoken of in Jeremiah 31:31, where it says, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, says the Lord. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their father, and they shall be my people. Then Joshua 5:10 says, and speaks about the Passover of Joshua. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land, and the day after the Passover unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year, so, which is a picture for us of new miracles. In other words, for all those years when the Hebrews were in the desert, God provided manna for them. Now, because they've crossed the river through the examination process, they were going to be provided for in a different way. Mostly, they would do their own harvesting and reaping of all the crops that were already actually there. So God was still going to care for them, just in a different way, which is a shadow for us that, people say that I make my own money, I make my own living. But look, if it wasn't for God, you wouldn't be able to do that. So in essence, God is our provider. Whether we recognize it or not, God is our provider. So Yeshua's week leading to Pesach is very harrowing. Yeshua rode into Jerusalem on the donkey during the lamb selection day, just as the children of Israel were examined by the Lord as they crossed the Jordan River. This is a very important event prophesied hundreds of years earlier by Zechariah, recorded in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So you see, this was prophesied hundreds of years before, that Israel's king at the first would come in riding on a donkey. And that's very unusual because no other king had done that. When you think about the fact that kings normally would come in riding on a very powerful horse, like maybe like a white stallion or a black stallion or some very strong animal. But here Yeshua comes in showing his humility, riding on the back of a donkey. And it says in John chapter 12, verse 3, so Mary Magdalene anointed his feet. This was soon before Jesus was being crucified. In Matthew 26:13, it says, Yeshua said this about Mary. Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. Because as you know, Mary Magdalene anointed Yeshua's feet with some very, very costly oil. In essence, she was preparing him for burial. I don't think she knew that or recognized it, but he did. In John 19:32, then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. And this is wonderfully prophesied for us in Psalm 34:20. He guards all his bones; not one of them is broken. Now back to John in verse 34. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And so we think about Zechariah 12:10. I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. They will look upon me whom they have pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. And he has testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that he's telling the truth, so that you may believe. Now, this is what John said. I'm going to read that again. So John, the writer of the book of John, of course, says here, and he who has seen this has testified, and his testimony is true. John's telling you, I saw this, and I'm telling you the truth. And he knows that he is telling the truth so that you may believe. And the reason why John is telling us these things about Jesus' crucifixion, about he was on that cross and how his bones were not broken. The other two on either side of him, their bones of their legs were broken so that they would go ahead and die because they couldn't push their bodies up to breathe. But Yeshua was already dead. So that fulfilled the prophecy because, as I just said in Psalms, that it says that God would not allow his bones to be broken. So then I have to ask this question, do you believe? John said these things so that we can know it's true and that we may believe. So it is time to make a decision for Yeshua. If you're hearing this and you're having questions and you're even questioning yourself, let me tell you, it is time. It's time for you to say, yes, I believe. Lord, I believe that you did do all these things. You are the Messiah. And I just pray and ask you now that you would help me to believe more and help me to totally and fully accept you into my life. God bless you, and speak to you again very soon.